5 years ago, where I have always been somebody who can basically like produce A- work in an hour that takes other people 9 hours, right? But then I'm constantly telling myself, if you can do the A- in an hour, then you should spend the 9 hours, then it would be an A+. Right. Or you should like do the more, right? So
it's a personality flaw if you don't want to do that.
Exactly. Like I should, right. And like, of course you should be trying to be the best, right? So I've been getting coached on this on and off for years. And I remember my master coach training, Brooke, Castillo, being like, what if you just were like, hey, isn't it awesome that I can do an A- in an hour without any planning or prep? Like Stacey Bayman and I talk about this all the time. Like, and I think so what she and I talk about is how like we're opposite and we both had trouble accepting it, right? Because this is what patriarchy does to women, I think, is just teaches us to believe that however we're doing it is wrong, right?
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because continuing on the theme that you started with Rachel Hart, in my mind, it's always like people who can produce A- work in an hour, but they do go through the trouble of producing A+ work in 9 hours. That's why they end up in Harvard and I ended up at Wellesley.
Yeah, that's definitely not why. Rachel also would think that, and it's the opposite.
You're human beings, and I'm doing my life wrong.
Yeah, no, I went to Harvard by doing everything at the last minute. But like Stacey had the opposite, where she's somebody who really does like to plan and spend a lot of time. Yeah. But she was just beating herself up, being like, well, Cara can do it in an hour. I should just do it on the fly, right? And so I think it's such an example of like, the truth is, the problem with the capitalism and Protestant productivity narrative, especially for women, is that nobody wins. Even the people who are like keeping that schedule or doing the 9 hours of work still don't feel good about themselves, right? Because you can never action your way to feeling good about yourself. Yeah. So I have been working on this for years, and it did fine. And then I felt like I had gotten to an okay place with it. And then I started building my team. And then it was just like, it all came back up, right? It's like, you can do work on dating and then you get in a relationship. And it's like, oh, Jesus, now there's a whole other level of like work I have to do. And so the fact of being a boss with employees who did have fixed work hours, like brought up this whole new depth of having to do that work all over again on like, what does it mean if I work? Even now, my brain is like, they're going to listen to the podcast, the employees, and they'll know, right? Like I had all this drama that what if I work 3 hours a day and they work 8 hours a day, right? What if I had all this drama around having employees brought up this sort of same thought pattern again, but just in the form of like having drama around.
Oh, kind of like being like perfectionistic towards them. And like,
both. I think I was like more judgmental of them when I was more judgmental of myself, of course.
Right.
But also kind of brought up this like, well, it's okay if you're only doing 4 hours of work a day when it's just you, but like you can't. But if you have employees who are working 8 hours a day, you can't be doing 4 hours of work a day, right? As though it's the hours that matter. And so when you and I started bonding about this, I had just finally had this breakthrough of like, oh, if somebody said to me, listen, you can hire me and I'm going to work 4 hours a day. And I'm going to 10 times your revenue or whatever, right? I'm going to double your revenue next year.
Jeez.
I'm only going to work those 4 hours a day. I'm not doing anything else. I'd be like, sold. Where do I sign? Like, I don't give a shit what you're doing with the rest of your time, right? And that is my role in my business, is to like do the deep thinking, create the content, have the strategic vision, all of these kinds of roles and jobs that maybe there are people who can do it 8 hours a day. I'm not one of them. I can do it 3 or 4 hours a day, like max. And then I need a nap. So I think I had just gotten to that place, and then you posted something about it. And I was like, it was almost like, I'm sure I'd heard that before, but I couldn't believe it. But then I was like right in the right place to be like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who's like this.
That's amazing. This seems like the perfect